This is the gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
We continue our reading of Pope Francis's short meditations, Meeting Jesus in the Sacraments. We are finishing chapter 12, of which title is The Children of God. The overarching point the Pope is making in this last part is that our hope in the risen Lord never fails, because God is always faithful to us. He reminds us that every day we must let Christ transform us and confirm us to Him. We must be the first to have this steadfast hope, and we must be visible, clear and radiant sign of it for everyone, the sign of our transformation despite our failures. The risen Lord is the hope that never fails, that never disappoints. Hope does not let us down. This is the hope of the Lord. How often in our life do hopes vanish? How often do the expectations we have in our heart come to nothing? Our hope as Christians is strong, safe and sound on this earth, where God has called us to walk, and it is open to eternity, because it is founded on God, who is always faithful. We must not forget, God is always faithful to us. Being raised with Christ through baptism, with the gift of faith, an inheritance that is incorruptible, prompts us to seek God's things more often, to think of Him more often, and to pray to Him more. Being Christian is not just obeying orders, but means being in Christ, thinking like Him, acting like Him, loving like Him. It means letting Him take possession of our life and change it, transform it, and free it from the darkness of evil and sin. Let us point out the risen Christ to those who ask us to account for the hope that is in us. Let us point Him out with the proclamation of the world, but above all with our lives as people who have been raised. Let us show the joy of being children of God, the freedom that living in Christ gives us, which is true freedom, the freedom that saves us from the slavery of evil, of sin, and of death. Looking at the heavenly homeland, we shall receive new light and fresh strength, both in our commitment and in our daily efforts. This is a precious service, continues the Pope, which we must give to this world of ours, that all too often no longer succeeds in raising its gaze on high, no longer succeeds in raising its gaze to God. This is such a powerful encouragement in these dark days of the war in Ukraine, that we must not forget God is always faithful to us, and this faithfulness of God is only highlighted by the stark contrast, the way in which we betrayed God by our lifestyle or by our interests or short-term decisions which led up to this war. God never abandons us. And as a practical reflection on the Pope's encouragement to live in Christ, thinking like Him, acting like Him, loving like Him, praying, as it were, like Him, that in this land, whenever we leave our home and lock our door and open it, or whenever we open a door and lock a door with our keys, just let us say a prayer for our world, that it might become more open to God. And let us start that prayer for ourselves, not to be locked up in ourselves, but to be opened up to God's love, as the Pope puts it, that we might succeed in raising our gaze on high.